Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Marcoux. I'm the Interim Chief of Staff at the District Department of Transportation. I want to welcome you all to this meeting of the Transportation Innovation Subcommittee of the Mayor's Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force. We're looking forward to getting feedback from the public about opportunities for the Transportation Innovation Subcommittee's recommendations to the Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force regarding transformational transportation infrastructure opportunities in the District of Columbia. We want to give people a minute or two more to help to join the meeting, and we will start the meeting very soon. Thank you so much for your time. So just a note to everybody, we do have a few more attendees who have joined. We're excited about this opportunity, so we want to give people another minute or two to join in before we begin. So thank you very much for your patience. Think of it as people coming into the auditorium and filling in the back chairs at the outer edge of the auditorium. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Marcoux. I am the Interim Chief of Staff at the District Department of Transportation. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Transportation Innovation Subcommittee of Mayor Bowser's Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force. It's Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. We have a lot of items we'd like to discuss and get feedback from you on. So let's just go ahead and jump in. Here's our agenda. We're going to have a welcome. We're going to go over some of the ground rules about how to participate. We're going to go through the vision. We're going to discuss an overview of ideas. We're going to get to the meat of the meeting, which is the community input. And then we'll close with some remarks and some opportunities for you to continue the dialogue, because the subcommittee is interested in hearing from you about transportation opportunities in the District of Columbia. So, just a note, this meeting is being recorded, and our goal is to have a dialogue with district residents. We're looking for your feedback. There are a variety of ways for you to give us feedback as we go through this meeting. You can chat us in the WebEx. Please click the chat icon to send messages. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand. For callers, dial *3. On the WebEx platform, click the hand icon, and for those using the WebEx browser or mobile app, click the 3-dot or ellipsis icon and select the hand icon from there. In addition, throughout the meeting, you can use Menti, an online platform for surveys and information. Use the code 8299-0100. A direct link appears in the chat. Within WebEx, click the 3-dot ellipsis icon and select Multimedia Viewer. You may need to click the Continue button to view the poll. Or you can scan the QR code that appears on the screen now using your phone. And not only during this meeting, but following this meeting, you can take our survey at infrastructure.dc.gov. Again, we really appreciate your participation. And with that, we'll begin the meeting. So this is the vision. In November of 2021, President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure law that allocates $1.2 trillion for the next 5 years to American infrastructure. In March of this year, Mayor Muriel Bowser announced the DC Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force. The purpose of the task force is to advise on priority projects that could be funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law. The district is expected to receive more than $3 billion over the next 5 years as a result of that law, and there are additional grant opportunities. There are 4 core principles that the mayor has announced that are fundamental to the work that the committee is doing, that the task force is doing. This includes looking for transformational projects. These are big, creative ideas that will do away with historical barriers and bring systems and resources together. Everything that we're going to look at must be equitable. It has to have equity at its core and carried out throughout the project. Equitable projects are the priority of this work, and the work must be sustainable. We have to address the climate crisis and build resiliency into the transportation infrastructure and network. We have to meet our current needs, but we can't compromise the future. And ultimately, what we consider must be achievable. That means we have to consider the resources that the district would need to realize the project vision. In order to look at this from a transportation network perspective, the Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force Executive Committee established the Transportation Innovation Subcommittee. In addition to the Transportation Innovation Subcommittee, there are 4 others looking at technological innovation, workforce capacity building, environment and resilience opportunities, and administration, compliance, and procurement. The Transportation Innovation Committee, which is meeting today and is garnering and soliciting your feedback, is comprised of 6 members. Everett Lott is the co-chair and the director of the Department of Transportation, the District of Columbia Department of Transportation. Cheryl Court is also a co-chair and is the director of policy for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. In addition, Herbert Harris, with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, Kate Ngata, the director of the Hill East District Redevelopment, Anita Cozart, the interim director of the Office of Planning, and Lucinda Babers, the deputy mayor for Operations and Infrastructure, who are present in the meeting, are also members of the committee, or the subcommittee. So the subcommittee has also established its priorities related to the work and the material that they, and the transportation infrastructure that they'd like to look at. These are items that will reconnect communities, that will bring neighborhood redevelopments to the district's transportation network and achieve the promise of the mayor's Vision Zero initiative. Some of the corridors that they've looked at in particular include North Capitol Street and I-295, both of which are large-scale infrastructure transportation network operations that do bisect and split neighborhoods. But there could be others. And so the subcommittee, while focusing on these two, would like to hear what other ideas or locations you have interest in looking at. So I just want to remind you, as we noted at the beginning, there are multiple ways that you can be providing feedback, including the Menti format and the infrastructure.dc.gov survey site. So, what are transformative transportation infrastructure projects? These are large-scale projects that involve work such as undergrounding existing transportation network, deckovers of existing transportation networks, transforming highways into boulevards, or other large-scale transportation innovation projects. Some of the examples of these, for example, for undergrounding, include the Big Dig in Boston and Seattle's State Route 99. These projects prove that undergrounding can work, and the District of Columbia can look at these projects and identify ways that it could effectively implement them with gaining from the experience of these other communities. For example, at Seattle's State Route 99 project, it took them 10 years. They built 2 miles of underground tunnel. It opened up 22 acres of public land in Seattle's downtown waterfront. And this has allowed them to establish new civic waterfront, an urban street with 4 travel lanes, parks, water access, habitat improvements, and better connections to downtown neighborhoods, including for cyclists and pedestrians. Here's an example in DC of a transformative transportation infrastructure project. The picture you see here is of the old 3rd Street tunnel site. The 3rd Street section is the I-395 spur that leads to the heart of the district at New York Avenue. As you can see, this large multi-lane highway running through the center of the city split that core area in 2. Pay careful attention to the buildings on the right-hand side, the red brick and beige brick buildings. You see from this picture that entire vista has changed and become much more human-centric. For example, that deckover established 7.5 acres of new city blocks. It built 3 bridges that connected and reconnected communities on the east and the west. And the 5 buildings that serve as the heart of the Capitol Crossing project are interconnected by an interior green space, also making it resilient. Here's an example from Seoul, where the Chonghae Freeway existed straight through the heart of the city. This is an example of reimagining highways to boulevards. This is what that same area looks like today. This transformation, which was completed in 2005, brought over 5 miles of green space through the center of the city. Nearby street temperatures dropped an average of 38 degrees Fahrenheit during the summers, and 500,000 visitors come to this area each week. This is an example from Paris, where the Pompidou Expressway, which was built just to carry vehicles from one area to the other and didn't consider uses by the public, pedestrians and cyclists, was reimagined. Now, this area includes a beautiful, spacious area for the public to engage and activate. This is a mile of pedestrian promenade with 11 acres of public space, picnic tables, restaurants, Zen gardens, children's play zones, and event space. Here's an example from Oakland. The Cypress Street Viaduct in Oakland was opened in June of 1957 which, as we all recall, was part of the highway network that was built under the Eisenhower administration. This was the first double-decker freeway in California. Its construction displaced over 600 families, and the surrounding urban renewal project destroyed over 5,000 residences. In 1989, we all might recall the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that, in addition to all the other devastation that occurred, destroyed the viaduct. Oakland saw this opportunity and reimagined that space to the following. This is that same space today. Opened in 2005, the Mandela Gateway, an affordable housing project, provides 168 affordable income housing units for residents. Multiple health benefits have been realized by this reimagining of the space. Annual nitrogen oxide levels around the parkway have decreased by 38%, and annual black carbon levels decreased by 25%. In addition, the parkway forms a critical link in the Bay Trail. The Bay Trail is a 500-mile walking and bicycle trail planned around the San Francisco Bay. What do all of these projects have in common? They are all transformative transportation infrastructure projects that reimagined existing transportation networks and rebuilt them so that the transportation network was made more resilient, was made more equitable, it connected communities, and ultimately has transformed those environs, those neighborhoods, and the businesses that use them. Here are examples of transformative transportation infrastructure visions from Los Angeles in the upper left, from New York in the lower left, and from Kansas City in the right. The whole point being, what the subcommittee is looking for is transformational projects. For example, along the North Capitol Street corridor, deck over, undergrounding, on the I-295 network, undergrounding, and finding a way to transform these into much more livable, connective spaces for the communities. So that's our presentation and the information we wanted to provide you as the ideas that the committee is looking at. There are multiple ways for you to engage with the subcommittee. Option one, you can click the chat icon and send messages, and I know we've received several so far. Option two, you can request to speak by raising your hand. Again, for callers, dial *3. For the WebEx platform, click the hand icon. And for the WebEx browser mobile app, click the ellipsis or 3-dot icon and select the hand icon from there. Just a reminder, we do have a Menti poll site available through menti.com and using the code H2990100. That material has been added to the chat. Within the WebEx, you can click that 3-dot ellipsis icon and select Multimedia Viewer. You may need to click the Continue button to view the poll, or again, you can scan the QR code that appears on the screen in front of you. And just a reminder, the infrastructure survey is available at infrastructure.dc.gov. And that link will be available and live beyond this meeting. The Menti link will close when this meeting ends. So with that said, let's look at some of the questions that members have asked and see what you're interested in presenting to the subcommittee as options and opportunities for a transportation network transformation. So, just to note, this meeting is totally virtual. So one of the questions we've been asked is, Are North Capitol Street or I-295 being looked at just as individual sections or as the entire network? And the short answer is either. We're interested in knowing from you, the community, where you think the most impact could be provided by reimagining these corridors, their uses, and how transportation intersects with these communities. In addition, and we want to be clear about this, any of the transportation network changes that we're talking about will be multimodal and will incorporate the needs of all users of the network. So as you can see, for example, we have, pardon me for 1 second. I just want to make sure we keep these live so that they're not scrolling through. Is there a way to pause them for a moment? Yeah. Great. Sorry. Thank you. There's a great technical team, and I am all thumbs when it comes to IT. So I really appreciate the team who are assisting me here. So some of the comments we received: fixes to these two corridors are desperately overdue. They are safety nightmares, and they are creating carbon and particle pollution in vulnerable neighborhoods. We need transformative changes to the entirety of both corridors, not half measures. That's great to hear, and that you support a highway to boulevard conversion of North Capitol Street. That's excellent to hear. We really appreciate this feedback. Please bury or deck over I-295. That would be amazing. Consider Georgia Avenue 2. It is seen as an urban highway. Thank you very much. In terms of these visions, are you looking for, it sounds like you, and this is great, you're not looking for incremental changes. You're looking for large-scale fundamental changes to these networks. So, for example, we have some people who are explaining that they would like deckovers, like what's being proposed under the DuPont Circle underpass. That's an excellent point. North Capitol Street also has a variety of underpasses, and decking over and creating a boulevard experience there can also reconnect those neighborhoods. Relocating some of DC's freeway from surface facing to underground structures like Boston's Big Dig could reconnect communities and create new areas for land development for more affordable housing. That's an excellent point, that affordable housing and land development need to be integral to the considerations for the subcommittee. Thank you.
We have two raised hands who would like to provide voice.
Great,
comments.
thank you.
The first one will be Nick. Let's go ahead and have Nick.
Hi, Nick. Is Nick unmuted?
Yeah.
Telly. I live over in the Edgewood neighborhood, and I've lived in and around North Capitol for the last 9 years. I'm intimately familiar. I'm very glad that this is a focus of the conversation today. You know, as I'm sure you're aware, it's killed 6 people now in the last, or no, excuse me, 9 people in the last 5 years. It's a deadly street. And that, you mentioned the Vision Zero is one of the priorities here. And I would hope that that kind of safety becomes the first and foremost thing we look at. But the second thing, as I think about transformational change here, is that the amount of pollution that is caused, not just from the particle pollution, which is making it difficult for health effects for people near this highway through residential neighborhoods, but also the amount of carbon that all the car trips on the street take and make. And so what I think about too is that we need to plan for growth coming to this corridor, right? Everyone's talked about McMillan for many years, the Armed Forces Retirement Home. There will be more trips along this corridor, but there is no more room on this street. We already stole people's front yards to make this street wider and to great diseffect. So the way that I've been thinking about this is, what is a change that is going to increase the capacity of this road while making it safer? And that's why I'm so attracted to a boulevard conversion that would prioritize bus lanes, which are a much more efficient way to move all these people. I believe that the demand for bus lanes would be very, very high demand for bus usage on North Capitol Street. And so I would much prefer a boulevard vision that allowed for surface level bus priority lanes over an undergrounding treatment, which would basically maintain the same number of car lanes and still have the capacity problems that we have. So I'd encourage you to think about the ways that we are helping to reduce car trips on the corridors as part of the goals of the transformational change. Thank you.
Nick, thank you very much. I really appreciate those comments. If I heard you correctly, what you were explaining was that we do need to look visionarily, right? We need to plan for what will be coming in along these corridors, what future trips will look like, what land redevelopment will look like. And we also need to make sure that we are building into this from the beginning safety, because as you noted, this is a corridor that desperately needs additional consideration to become safer. And as a result, not only will we be making it safer, but we also will be more efficient because, as I heard you say, we'll be using it for different modes of transit, for example, prioritizing bus lanes. That's great. So you'd like the subcommittee to consider those components in relation to its transformation. That has the additional benefits, as you noted, of reducing pollution and particulate matter in the area. Thank you very much. That was a very helpful comment. We really appreciate that. Who's the next person?
The next person, I believe his name's Connor Shaw. Connor Shaw will be unmuted right now.
Connor Shaw?
For taking feedback from the community. I also wanted to speak in favor of a highway to boulevard conversion of North Capitol Street, you know, for many of the reasons that Nick mentioned, but I wanted to focus on equity in particular. Even though about 35% of residents who live along the corridor rely on transit to get around, the current treatment of North Capitol Street does not serve them well at all. The 80 bus, which is the main route along North Capitol Street, has been given failing grades by those who monitor its performance, and the trip downtown can take 40 minutes when it should take 10 to 15. There are also communities on the northern part of the North Capitol Street corridor that really lack good access to transit because they can't really access the Metro Red Line. And so installing bus lanes and, you know, bringing a boulevard treatment to North Capitol Street could dramatically improve, you know, equitable access to good transportation along the corridor. I also just wanted to express some concern about undergrounding options, which, you know, Boston's Big Dig was enormously expensive, but in my mind has not really reconnected communities in a vibrant way. There's still a lot of dead space there. There's still a lot of space required to bring cars to the surface level on and off ramps. And those can just be very inhospitable to urban life, to sustainability, to actually reconnecting communities. So I hope that this task force will look closely at the details of how we're actually going to reconnect communities to make sure that these transformative ideas actually deliver on their promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor, very much. That was really great to hear. A few of the things I think I heard you say include the following. First, we need to make sure that as it's designed in a way that ultimately does serve both the community and transportation. So, for example, improvement of bus service. But in addition, it's in a manner that I think, if I heard you correctly, you said that undergrounding would not be as beneficial as turning this from a highway to a boulevard. Highways to boulevards are better equipped to handle multimodal transit. They are safer corridor connectors. In addition, you wanted to make sure that equity is included into this because of the challenges that can be created through affordable housing losses. One of the items I noted in the chat was also a comment that was raised regarding issues with gentrification that can occur after these projects. And you wanted the district, the commenter wanted the district to consider those points related to ensuring that affordable housing is available and the different options that the district has to make that a reality as it considers the broader network changes that would occur through this transportation operation. This is really helpful feedback. Thank you. Is there anybody else who has their hand raised?
We have two more. We have Artili.
Hi.
We'll be unmuting you now.
And I apologize. Artile?
Ardely.
Artile, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you.
So again, Ardely Wright, I live in Parkside. So I am one of those communities that are landlocked between 295 and Anacostia Park in Kenilworth Park. So I have a couple points. The first is that I think that there should be some type of park or greenway above 295 that connects the communities such as Parkside, Kenilworth, Eastland Gardens, across 295 to what is now being called downtown Ward 7 or Minnesota Avenue. I also think that when thinking about like transformative, infrastructure options, I feel like I see in other cities where the highways are like walkable. There's a, bicycle or pedestrian path that is adjacent to the main highway. And one of the best examples in this area is what you see when you drive the Wilson Bridge. So the folks that live in either, National Harbor or Old Town Alexandria, they can actually walk across 495, a major highway, and they can walk or bike in between those two vastly different communities. And so I would love to see something like that on 295. So just to help provide more options for transportation to and from points east and also north. And when I say north, I would love to see if that was something that was implemented. I would also love to see it on Route 50, which has not really been mentioned here, but it would be great to be able to get from Parkside or Kenilworth or any of the communities in Ward 7 and just kind of easily get to all that's great about the Dakota Crossings area. And so if there was some type of elevated green bridge that kind of crosses Route 50, connecting that community, but also connecting that community with, Kenilworth Park and the Arboretum. As of now, there's really no pedestrian or cyclist friendly way to get there. And so I think that would be a plus. And then I would just echo everything that was said about, the opportunities for North Capitol Street. Growing up in DC, I actually lived on W Street in North Capitol. And so lots of accidents were occurring then, they're occurring now. So we'd love to see some more pedestrian friendly ways to kind of cross that what's essentially a highway in the middle of the city. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thank you very much. That was really a great comment. One of the points I heard you thread throughout this was not only the point about connecting communities, for example, finding a way to connect across 295 and reimagining 295. You found a particular focus on the pedestrian use of spaces. I think that's very important, right? Pedestrian and cyclist use of spaces. The subcommittee has made that a central component. It's also a critical element of the mayor's Vision Zero point, as was made earlier, I think, by Connor. We do want to note, you had mentioned that the Wilson Bridge is bikeable and walkable. Just a note that the recently completed Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge on South Capitol Street is also very bike friendly and very pedestrian friendly. There are ovals at either end that are park-like settings. So it is something that the district is interweaving into all of its projects, and most especially these types of large-scale transformational projects. Thank you very much for that thoughtfulness. Also appreciated your noting that the Route 50 New York Avenue corridor is another one for the subcommittee to consider as part of its overarching vision for its recommendations up to the task force. We have another person who's hand up.
Sorry, I have one more recommendation.
Okay.
And that is with respect to 295. So I also think about like when I'm driving in Virginia or really any other place except for DC, I don't see any like sound barriers. So like we hear like all the rattling of the trucks, any accidents that happen on 295, like we hear and feel all of that in Parkside. So if there are any considerations about like erecting those like I don't know, beige looking sound barriers that you typically see on highways. In DC, I would love for those to be green walls. So like maybe vines or some type of trees or something that kind of obscure it. But I think that that would, one, help with like just, you know, quality of life and like sound and all the gases and things that come from the cars into the community. But also just kind of help connect, you know, the park that's kind of to the west of our houses, to, you know, this potential green wall, that kind of shields us from like the pollution of the cars, to our east.
Oh, thank you. That's a very helpful point, that we need to make sure that as we're building this infrastructure, we're considering environmental impacts above and beyond particulate matter and other air pollution. I heard you mention sound pollution and concerns about that. Thank you very much. I did want to note also that in the chat, and I know we have a few more people with hands raised, I just want to note that in the chat, Rick Rybeck, who I'm going to assume that is the Rick Rybeck who used to work at the District Department of Transportation. So Mr. Rybeck, it's nice to hear from you again. You did make a note that it's important to consider the economic impacts to surrounding neighborhoods regarding these transformational projects, and that's a very valuable and important point for the subcommittee's consideration, because the subcommittee doesn't want to have unintended consequences from the choices that it makes regarding projects to report up to the task force. Thank you. This feedback is so very helpful. And if the subcommittee members have any questions or comments, if they're interested in for feedback, please let us know. We'll make sure we drill down a little bit deeper on any of these points. We do have two more people with their hands up. And so I think the first person is Zach, if I am reading this correctly. So Zach, you are unmuted and we'd love to hear from you.
Israel. I'm actually an ANC commissioner up in Ward 4 in Petworth and Brightwood Park. And the first thing I would mention is that I hope that the task force does seriously consider exploring applying for federal funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law grant programs to transform Georgia Avenue, which I represent several blocks of Georgia Avenue, and make it safer for all users, as well as improving bus transit service on the entire corridor. And I'm pretty certain that both the 70 and 79 Metro bus routes are among the most utilized in the entire bus system, actually, in DC. And that goes from Silver Spring all the way to Pennsylvania Avenue in downtown. So, and I know that DDOT is currently looking at the lower part of Georgia Avenue right now, in like the first phase of the bus priority plan project, and that the other two phases would happen in the next several fiscal years. But I think there's a great opportunity here, especially with the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, which I know USDOT announced the notice of funding opportunity a few weeks ago about that, for DDOT and the task force to apply for funds for that program to make all of Georgia Avenue, again, more transit friendly for bus service and safer for pedestrians. There are a lot of intersections that have no signals and is extremely dangerous for pedestrians going from Petworth to 16th Street Heights. There's a lot of families that go to a recreation center in one neighborhood and they have to walk back and forth, or their kids go to public school on one neighborhood and they walk back and forth, and it's just too dangerous in too many places. So I really urge the task force and the subcommittee to look, holistically at this principal arterial corridor. The other thing I would note is that when you're talking about North Capitol Street, ANC 4D, which I serve on, is actually bounded by Georgia Ave, Missouri Ave, and North Capitol. And we have the part of North Capitol Street through the Fort Totten neighborhood. And especially with the completion of the Brookland Fort Totten Metropolitan Branch Trail connection, there are a lot of residents in my neighborhood who bike to the trail, and it's very dangerous for them to cross back and forth over North Capitol to get to the trail. Even at stoplights, there's very aggressive drivers and whatnot. So I would urge the task force to look at safety improvements further north on North Capitol. And then just the last comment I have is that I really urge the task force, if possible, to proactively reach out to ANCs throughout the whole city, especially those that have principal arterial roads that go through them, I think you would find a lot of really positive feedback and helpful feedback for the work that you all are doing from commissioners, some of whom have served for many, many years, and for residents who have lived in these neighborhoods for many, many years. So if that would be possible, highly recommend that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you very much. And I just want to note on a personal basis, always appreciate hearing from A&C commissioners. You all are you're volunteering your time and you're being selected by your neighbors to be your representatives to speak to the government. It's a tough job. It's a job that people do because they are committed to the city. Thank you very much for showing that type of commitment. You raised really important points there, including the fact that it's not just the direct funding, but it's also the grant funding. So you're absolutely right to make sure that the Department of Transportation is, as well as the subcommittee, are looking at all the grant opportunities they have, making sure that we're looking at Vision Zero components, considering the Georgia Avenue corridor and other corridors throughout the city as opportunities for this type of visionary transformation. That's very valuable. You also made a note in there, and this is something that others have commented on, that the subcommittee should make sure that as part of its consideration, and this is one of the priorities the subcommittee has identified, it's looking at connecting networks, right? So connecting to transportation networks. You had mentioned the Fort Totten station off of North Capitol Street, and that's a really great and valuable point for the subcommittee's consideration. I know we have one more person. Alex Lopez wants to speak. So, Mr. Lopez, you're unmuted. Oh, there we go.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Alex Lopez. I'm ANC Commissioner for 6002. ANC 60 represents parts of Shaw, Mount Vernon Triangle, and the Sursum Corda neighborhoods. I want to applaud DDOT for seriously considering North Capitol Street as one of the priority projects. There's been far too many crashes on that street in my neighborhoods, resulting in death, injury, and property damage. North Capitol does divide communities. As you're aware, it does suppress economic activity and property values on the street. And I concur with some of the comments that Connor and Nick made, that the preferred treatment for North Capitol Street would be a conversion from a highway to a boulevard that prioritizes bus, bike, and pedestrian travel along that network. Another item that I want to bring up is trails. Nobody's brought this up so far. The Capitol Trails Coalition published a report, I think it was earlier this year or late last year, that identified 43.2 miles of trails that could be built in Washington, D.C. as part of a broader regional trail network. In D.C. alone, expansion of the trails can create $162 million of total economic impact and $463 million of total aggregate impact that includes increased user access to trails, avoided public health costs, $100 million of avoided public health costs, $23 million in lifetime carbon storage benefits, $8.6 million in annual environmental costs. So I would strongly encourage the task force and subcommittee to revisit the Capitol Trails Network report and take a look at some of these trails that will increase access to not only to recreation, but also to alternative means of travel to economic centers for residents throughout our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I just want to reiterate the comments that I earlier regarding ANC commissioners. You raise a really valuable and important point there, in particular, that it's important that we consider all the types of transportation changes. So as we noted in some of the examples, there are connections to trails or trails themselves that are incorporated into the design. So that's a valuable piece of feedback for the subcommittee, because that also ties back not only to the specific thinking from the committee about Vision Zero and being connective of transportation networks, but it also ties into the broader task force goal and objective regarding sustainability, because as you noted, there are a lot of environmental benefits that accrue from trails. So thank you. That's really very valuable, helpful feedback. We have one more person, I believe, who has raised their hand. David Menny, I believe. So David, you are unmuted, and then we have another person directly behind you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Well, I can.
Excellent. Thank you for pulling this together. I just want to say I agree with pretty much everyone else who has spoken already. I think especially the attention on North Capitol is very valued here, especially making that a more corridor long, ambitious project and potentially a model for a more systematized arterial modernization. I put this in the survey link, but just wanted to speak up and elaborate on two items that I think could also deserve some attention. Both are recommendations in the crosstown multimodal study that DDOT put out in 2017. So they already are recommended and have their own cost estimates. So the first is the that Michigan Avenue interchange, which is just to the west end of the Armed Forces Retirement Home. It's recommended to deconvert that and rebuild the street grid there, which would also open up some developable space and would connect much better to the development that's going to be along Michigan Avenue, similar to some of the changes on North Cap and the Cloverleaf there. And then the second, further west, is the intersection at 16th, Columbia, and Harvard, which is really the unifying point, or should be the unifying point, between Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant, and Columbia Heights. As that study pointed out, not all pieces of infrastructure that divide communities look exactly like highways, and I would say that's a really good example. Because they're surface streets, but it includes 3 public parks that are really chopped up by that intersection. And between the Columbia Road Bus Priority Project and the 16th Street bus lanes, they've both left kind of a big question mark as to how that intersection can be improved, since there's so many complicated movements. So I think that would fit very much in the spirit of pulling together what are some pretty major and dense and walkable communities. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I think one of the important components that you raised, and I think it goes to some of the comments we've seen in the chat, for example, from Heather Foote, is that that there are other locations and other areas on perhaps smaller scales that can be looked at, that can provide transportation value, that meet the goals and objectives both of the task force and of the subcommittee. And you're absolutely right about those. I do want to note that as the deputy mayor put into the chat, the purpose of the task force and the subcommittee itself is to think big and to look at big picture concepts related to transportation transformation. But your points related to trails that was made earlier, the point you had made about the Michigan Avenue exchange and the study that was done, those are very valuable and important points to bring back to the department's attention for its consideration. I did also want to note that while the comment was made about thanking the department for looking into this, and the co-chair of the committee is the director of the Department of Transportation, this is a larger scale group, and it includes representatives from the public, such as Cheryl Court, who is co-chair and the director of policy for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. It involves people who are engaged in the transportation operations, such as Mr. Harris. It also includes Anita Kozart, the interim director at the at the Office of Planning, as well as Kate Gata, who is involved in the Hill East redevelopment program, and obviously Deputy Mayor Lucinda Babers. So this has been a very helpful conversation. Why don't we?
We move to the next slide, but we still have 2 more comments. So while
Oh.
they're filling in, you can take those comments.
Got it. So we're going to move to the next slide, but we're going to continue to take comments. So these are other areas that people have looked at and other concepts that they would like the subcommittee to consider. I will note that somebody said, hi, Matthew. Hi back. Thank you very much. So we have Garrett Hennigan. So Garrett, you are unmuted.
Good afternoon, I guess. My name is Garrett Hennigan. I'm from the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, and I appreciate y'all taking this time to get feedback, both of the survey that you've had up and this. I wanted to take a moment, just not to point to specific projects necessarily, but to share our perspective on what we think $3 billion or more could be spent on, and how we see transformation. I think most fundamentally, DC is committed to a lot of things. More equitable transportation, getting people to jobs faster, a sustainable transportation system, and also set pretty specific goals in the Sustainable DC Transportation Plan. The administration and the district has committed to getting car trips down to just 25% of trips, and all other trips, 75% of them happening by transit, by walking and biking. We've seen incremental change towards that goal. When you build better bike networks, when you build better bus networks, people see the benefit and they hop on them. And I think transformation would mean really leaning into that. So, we need to do more than putting a pretty Band-Aid on a highway or a car-only infrastructure. We need to change the underlying priority of what modes on our surface streets, get to move the quickest, get to move the most reliably across the city. That should be the bus. That should be bicycling and walking. Undergrounding or decking over, highways, it really just puts those existing car traffic somewhere else. It doesn't disappear. It just puts it out of view. When to actually achieve DC's equitable transportation goals, its sustainable goals, its carbon reduction goals, we need to move people out of their cars. So transformation projects really, it's about helping communities get closer to DC's sustainable DC booster goal with fast, reliable, sustainable transportation. And we don't get that through a big investment in one place. We can make a wonderful park and that'd be transformational for that one place, but not achieve the other goals. But instead, it's little targeted changes across the city, bringing equity in by setting priorities with the data we already have about who has access to jobs, how long it takes people in some communities to get to those jobs, where the streets are safest and not. Just a few other thoughts. Mode share change we get through carrots and sticks, right? And those carrots have to be very good, and the sticks have to be there. There has to be something saying, consider getting out of your car and taking another option. Paris, over the past couple of years, and many European cities have massively invested in transit, biking, and walking, while at the same time actually taking pretty aggressive steps to make it less convenient to drive. So the best way to do this is to really radically redistribute the space that we have on our roads from cars, which we know pollute the most and have horrible impacts on the communities that they travel through, and put it to other modes. I just wanted to end by saying, DC has a great example of doing this kind of big picture change. The Anacostia Watershed Initiative, which over the period of about 10 years, completely transformed the waterfront with new bridges, with new trail networks, with new wildlife spaces. We can make a plan of that same size and do it all at once, not incrementally, not a little bit here and there where it's convenient, but do it all at once. That would be transformation for us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Garrett. I really appreciate that. What I think I heard you say, and it's important, I want to make sure that I understood it correctly, and it's a valuable perspective, which is instead of looking at individual corridors or individual segments of the transportation network that could be transformed through this funding, look at systemic changes. Look at the types of changes, more importantly, that you recommend are most closely driven toward or pointed toward provable change, provable improvements that are focused on the goals and visions that have been stated related to trip generation, so that we reduce car trips to 25% of existing modes. I'm gonna make something that I hope you understand, because I think you know me, Garrett. I think we've worked together before. That you tying into some of the things you said, that we should think of it as build bike better or build bus better. That we should be looking at it transformationally across networks like that. Thank you very much. It's a really helpful comment and suggestion. We're down to only a few minutes, and we have one more commenter, Jennifer Cooper. I do want to note, as we unmute Ms. Cooper and ask her to speak, that there is another page. Please go to menti.com. Please fill in that information. It will still be live while we're holding this meeting. And in addition, I want to reiterate that infrastructure.dc.gov is a space where you can fill out a survey to help inform the subcommittee about your perspectives and approaches that it should take regarding the District of Columbia. And we're pointing at the last survey question on the screen now. With that said, Ms. Cooper, are you ready?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Or at least, again, I can.
I just want to emphasize that pedestrians need to be the group put first in this equation. A lot of times, pedestrians and cyclists get lumped into one group, which ends up being cyclists get prioritized. And whenever we look at the big picture, it's not just climate change. It's not just we need to redo the infrastructure, but the population is rapidly graying. And we need to really start to think about dementia-friendly design and the fact that people aren't necessarily going to be taking buses or being able to drive. And walking is really the best way to ward off dementia, help us be part of our communities, and also to be safe. So I just want to say that please, please do not forget to put pedestrians first in this equation.
Jennifer, thank you very much for that comment. It's really important to bear that in mind. Multimodal transit includes the most primary mode, because as some person put it, and I apologize because I'm probably slightly misquoting them, everybody's a pedestrian at some point during the day. And so it's a very valuable reminder that this network and this transformational work that the subcommittee is looking at has to include pedestrians in particular as a primary user of the system and a system designed for their needs. So these are the questions that we've gone over in the chat, both here in the chat, but also in the Menti forum. At this point, we are getting ready to close. So I just want to thank you all very much for your time. On behalf of the subcommittee, our final thoughts are the following, and I think I'm speaking for the subcommittee when I say this. We appreciate the positive engagement that the community has brought to us today. You've raised some very important points that reinforce some of the thinking the subcommittee had already gone through, that give the subcommittee some additional perspective and thoughts to consider as it goes through its process of developing its recommendations for the task force. And you've given some really great feedback about how not only this money can be used, but priorities that the Department of Transportation can look at in particular, and opportunities that can be garnered and taken advantage of as we move forward. And what I ultimately heard you say most especially was, please keep you informed and engaged as we move through this. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Please remember to use infrastructure.dc.gov. This has been a very valuable exercise. On behalf of the subcommittee, on behalf of the co-chair, Cheryl Court, and Director Lott, thank you very much for your time. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your week.